Consider this. Right now, sitting in the Iraq Museum in Baghdad, in the British Museum in London, in the Oriental Institute in Chicago, there are thousands of clay tablets, broken, reassembled, painstakingly translated over the last 150 years. These tablets are older than the Bible, older than the Torah, older than any written scripture that billions of people consider sacred. And they tell the same stories. Not vaguely similar stories, not stories that share a theme or a feeling, the same stories with the same characters, the same sequence of events, the same divine warnings, the same punishments, the same promises made afterward. 4,000 years before the Bible was written, there was another civilization, one that had already documented the creation of mankind, the Great Flood, the Garden of Paradise, the Serpent, the forbidden knowledge. They were called the Sumerians, and they left behind thousands of clay tablets buried under the sands of modern-day Iraq that contain stories so similar to the Bible that scholars have been arguing about them for over a century. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not a religious debate. This is history, documented, verified, translated by the world's leading linguists, displayed in the most prestigious museums on Earth. And it raises questions that no one seems to want to answer directly. Were the stories in the Bible original, or were they inherited, adapted, passed down through generations from a civilization so ancient that most people alive today have never heard of them? Who were the gods that the Sumerians described, beings who created humanity, who walked among us, who gave us language and agriculture and law, and then one day, inexplicably, disappeared? And why, across every continent, in every era of human history, do we keep telling the same stories? Did the greatest stories ever told have an origin we were never taught about? To understand what the Sumerians wrote, we first need to understand who they were. Sumer was the world's first known civilization, not just one of the earliest, the first. They appeared in southern Mesopotamia, in what is now Iraq, around 4,500 BCE. That's over 6,000 years ago. Before Greece, before Egypt built its pyramids, before Rome was even a concept, before Abraham, before Moses, before any of the religious traditions that dominate the modern world. The Sumerians were already there, already building cities, already governing themselves, already writing. They invented writing, not just any writing, the world's first writing system, called cuneiform, wedge-shaped marks pressed into soft clay tablets, then dried or fired to preserve them forever. This allowed them to record laws, trade agreements, astronomical observations, medical texts, philosophical dialogues, and most importantly for us today, stories. Their cities were extraordinary. Uruk, possibly the world's first true city, had a population of 50,000 people at its height. It had monumental temples called ziggurats, rising in terraces toward the sky. It had a city wall 11 kilometers long. Nippur was their religious center, the city of the god Enlil, king of the gods. Eridu was considered by the Sumerians themselves to be the oldest city on Earth, the first city built by the gods before the flood. the city of the moon god, was one of the most prosperous trading hubs in the ancient world. These were not primitive villages. These were complex, organized, sophisticated societies, with courts, schools, libraries, and bureaucracies, functioning thousands of years before the civilizations we typically learn about in school. The Sumerians understood mathematics. They worked in base 60, which is why we still divide the hour into 60 minutes and the circle into 360 degrees. They mapped the night sky with extraordinary precision. They identified the 5 visible planets. They calculated the lunar calendar. They tracked the movements of Venus with accuracy that modern astronomers have verified. They were also the first to write down the names of their gods. The Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were the great gods of the Sumerian pantheon, a council of divine beings who, according to the texts, descended from the heavens, established civilization on Earth, and created the human race to serve them. Their names appear on thousands of tablets. Anu, the sky god, father of all the gods; Enlil, lord of wind and storms, ruler of the earth; Enki, god of wisdom and fresh water, creator of humanity, the one who loved humans most. By the time Abraham, the founding patriarch of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, was born in the ancient city of Ur, the Sumerians had already been writing these stories for thousands of years. And Ur was a Sumerian city. Think about that for a moment. The man considered the founding father of the world's three major monotheistic religions, religions followed today by over half the human population, was born in the middle of the civilization that had already written every story those religions consider sacred. In the book of Genesis, God creates man from the dust of the earth. He breathes life into him. He places him in a garden. He gives him a companion, a woman created from his rib. He gives them one rule, they break it, and everything changes forever. This story is known by billions of people. It is the foundation of how much of the world understands human origins. But here is what most people don't know. The Sumerians wrote almost this exact same story thousands of years earlier. In the Sumerian texts, the gods, the Anunnaki, have a problem. They have been assigned to perform hard labor, mining gold, digging canals, working the earth, and after 40 years of this, they revolt. So their leader, the wise god Enki, proposes a solution: create a worker being, a primitive human, something intelligent enough to follow orders, but not divine enough to threaten the gods. Enki mixes clay from the earth, the same raw material, with the blood of a slain god. A spark of divinity mixed into the clay of the earth. He breathes life into this creation. He calls it Adamu. Adamu from the clay of the earth, given a divine spark, created to serve. The Hebrew word Adam comes from the word Adama, meaning earth or red clay. The connection is not coincidence. The word itself is Semitic, a linguistic family that traces directly back to ancient Mesopotamia. But the parallels run even deeper. The Sumerian goddess Ninhursag, also called Ninmah, assists Enki in the creation. She is called the mother of life. She shapes the clay. She brings forth the human form. In Genesis, the first woman is created from Adam's rib. Here is something remarkable. In the Sumerian language, the word for rib and the word for life are the same, Nint. The goddess whose name means Lady of the Rib also means Lady who gives life. This double meaning, impossible to preserve in translation, only makes sense in Sumerian. It is one of the clearest pieces of linguistic evidence that the Genesis story was directly derived from older Sumerian sources. And then there is the garden. The Sumerians had a word for the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the heartland of their civilization. They called it Eden. In their language, Eden meant the abode of the righteous, the place of the gods on earth. The Tree of Life appears in Sumerian art over and over, a sacred tree flanked by two figures, often the Anunnaki themselves, sometimes a serpent coiled around its base. This image predates Genesis by thousands of years. It appears on cylinder seals, on temple walls, on ceremonial objects recovered from the oldest archaeological layers of Mesopotamian civilization. The story of Eden was already ancient when Moses wrote it down. Perhaps no story in the Bible is is more universally known, the Noah and the Great Flood. God looks down at humanity and sees only wickedness. He decides to destroy everything, but he finds one righteous man, Noah, and warns him to build an ark, to take his family, to take 2 of every living creature, to survive what is coming. The flood comes. It lasts 40 days and 40 nights. The ark lands on a mountain. Noah releases a dove to find dry land, and when the waters recede, God makes a covenant with Noah, a rainbow promising never to destroy humanity again. Now let me tell you the Sumerian version. Written approximately 1700 BCE, predating the earliest Hebrew texts by centuries, the Epic of Atrahasis tells the story of a great flood sent by the gods to destroy humanity. The god Enlil looks down at humanity and is disturbed. They are too many, too noisy. They are multiplying beyond control and disrupting the rest of the gods. He convinces the council of the Anunnaki to act. First, they send plague, then drought, then famine, but each time, the wise god Enki secretly helps the humans survive. Finally, Enlil loses patience. He calls a council of the gods and makes them swear an oath of silence. The plan is absolute: send a flood, destroy everything, start over. But Enki, who had always felt a special bond with the humans he helped create, refuses to let them all die. He cannot directly warn them because he swore the oath. So he finds a loophole. He goes to the house of a righteous man named Atrahasis, which literally means exceedingly wise, and he speaks not to the man, but to the walls of his house. Wall, listen to my words. Reed fence, pay attention to my instructions. Tear down your house and build a boat. Abandon your possessions and save living things. The flood comes. It lasts 7 days and 7 nights. The boat lands on a mountain. Atrahasis releases a bird to find dry land. When the waters recede, he makes offerings to the gods. Noah, Atrahasis, the same man, the same story. And this version was not unique even among the Sumerians. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest known piece of literature, tells the same story again. A man named Utnapishtim, a boat, a flood, a bird released to find land, the gods making a covenant afterward never to do it again. But what makes this truly staggering is what happens when you look beyond Mesopotamia. In the ancient Hindu scriptures, the Shatapatha Brahmana, there is a man named Manu. A great fish warns him that a flood is coming and instructs him to build a boat. The fish turns out to be the god Vishnu himself. Manu survives. Humanity continues through him. In ancient Greece, there is Deucalion, son of Prometheus, the god who gave fire to humanity. Zeus looks down and decides to flood the earth to destroy a wicked human race. Deucalion builds a chest. He and his wife Pyrrha float for 9 days and 9 nights. The waters recede. They land on a mountain. They repopulate the earth. In Mesoamerica, the ancient Maya recorded a flood myth in the Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the Kayich Maya. The gods create humanity multiple times, and each time they are displeased, they destroy their creation with water. The survivors start again. The Aztec tradition describes a great flood as the destruction of the fourth sun, the fourth age of the world, from which only 2 people survived to populate the next age. We have identified over 250 independent flood myths from cultures around the world, from the indigenous peoples of North America to the Aboriginals of Australia, from sub-Saharan Africa to the islands of the Pacific. Every major civilization on every inhabited continent has its own story of a catastrophic flood that nearly erased humanity. They cannot all be borrowing from each other. Many of these cultures had no contact with Mesopotamia, no contact with the Bible, no contact with each other at all. Which raises a question that mainstream history has not fully answered. What if they are all remembering the same event? There is one more story we need to examine. In Genesis, God places Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, a paradise where everything is provided. There is only one rule: do not eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. A serpent approaches Eve. It tells her that if she eats the fruit, she will not die, she will become like God, knowing good and evil. She eats, Adam eats, and they are cast out of paradise forever. The story is presented as the origin of human suffering, the moment we became conscious of our own mortality, the moment we were separated from the divine. But the Sumerians had been telling this story in different forms for thousands of years before Genesis. The Sumerian city of Dilmun was described in ancient texts as a pure, clean, and bright place, a place where the lion does not kill, where the wolf does not seize the lamb, where sickness is unknown, where old age does not exist, a paradise, a garden. It is widely considered by scholars to be the original source of the Eden myth. In one Sumerian text called Enki and Ninhursag, the god Enki eats 8 sacred plants that the mother goddess has grown in the Garden of Dilmun. She curses him in fury. He falls desperately ill, each of the 8 plants corresponding to a different part of his body, each part wasting away. His rib is specifically mentioned. Eventually, through negotiation and the intervention of the other gods, he is healed, but the price has been paid. The paradise is disrupted. The divine order has been broken. The pattern repeats: a garden, a divine being, a forbidden act, a curse, suffering, and exile from a perfect state. But there is another layer to this story that most people have never considered. In Sumerian culture, the serpent was not a symbol of evil, it was a symbol of wisdom. Enki, the god of wisdom, the creator of humans, the one who defied the other gods to save humanity from the flood, the one who taught humans the arts of civilization, was almost universally depicted in Sumerian iconography with a serpent. His symbol was 2 intertwined serpents rising from a staff. You may recognize this image. It became the caduceus, the symbol of medicine, knowledge, and healing that we still use today. The god of wisdom, associated with a serpent, who gave humanity knowledge they were not supposed to have, who defied the authority of the highest God to protect the humans he created. Now read the Garden of Eden again. A serpent approaches the humans. It tells them that if they eat the fruit, they will gain knowledge, they will become like God, knowing good and evil. The highest God is furious that they have gained this knowledge. He expels them from paradise. Who was the serpent trying to help, and whose authority was it defying? The Sumerian texts suggest that what we call the fall of man might have looked very different from where Enki was standing. I want to be clear about something before we close. This video is not an attack on any religion. It is not an attempt to diminish the faith of anyone who holds these stories sacred. What these texts mean, spiritually, personally, eternally, is between you and whatever you believe in. But the historical facts are not in dispute. These are taught in universities, published in peer-reviewed journals, accepted by mainstream archaeology and academic scholarship. The parallels between Sumerian mythology and biblical narrative are not the invention of fringe theorists. They are the documented findings of respected institutions like the University of Pennsylvania, the British Museum, the Oriental Institute of Chicago, and dozens of universities across Europe and the Middle East. The Sumerians were writing these stories before the Hebrew alphabet existed, before the Torah was compiled, before the first word of Genesis was ever committed to papyrus. And they were writing them in a city called Ur, the same city where Abraham was born. Now here is the question that matters. If Abraham grew up in Ur, surrounded by these stories, hearing them recited in temples dedicated to the Anunnaki, living in a culture built on these myths, what does that tell us about the origins of monotheism? Did Abraham have a radical revelation that changed everything? Or did he carry with him the stories he grew up with and slowly transform them, filtering out the polytheism, elevating one god above the others, and reimagining the ancient Sumerian narratives through a new theological lens? Scholars call this process syncretism, the blending and reinterpretation of religious traditions across cultures. It is as old as civilization itself. Every major religion in history has absorbed elements of what came before it. This is not a diminishment of faith. It is a recognition of how ideas travel, how stories survive, how human beings across centuries and continents reach for the same truths, the same explanations, the same desperate hope that someone, somewhere, knows why we are here and what we are supposed to do. The oldest stories in the world, carved into clay tablets by people who called themselves the black-headed ones, who looked up at the same stars we look at tonight, who asked the same questions we are asking now, those stories did not disappear. They transformed, they traveled, they became the foundations of everything that came after. Maybe that's all mythology is, the same fire passed from hand to hand through the dark. Or maybe the Sumerians were recording something real, something that actually happened, something that the rest of humanity has spent 6,000 years trying to remember. If this made you think, that is exactly what Mr. Origins is here for. We do not give you answers, we give you questions worth asking, questions that the official version of history tends to skip over, questions that sit in the silence between what we know and what we have been told. Subscribe to Mr. Origins, turn on notifications, because the next episode goes deeper. We will follow the Anunnaki, the gods who the Sumerians said created us, into the oldest written texts in human history. We will read what they actually said, in their own words, about where they came from, why they built civilization, and why they eventually disappeared. The beginning of the story is only this. In the beginning, there were gods, not the gods of religion, but beings of flesh and blood who came from the stars. They called themselves the Anunnaki, and they created us.